Alright, folks, it's time. Need for Speed has been shelved indefinitely. Yeah, I know the news is old, but around the time it came out, I had a lot of work-related stuff to do, and I also went on vacation for a little while, so here I am, finally. We're going to talk about Need for Speed being shelved. So, this sucks. Let's get that out of the way. It really does suck. For the longest time, I was a staunch denier of these rumors. I kept saying that no, Need for Speed is not cancelled or shelved because they haven't come out and said anything on those lines. And there was a lot of AI slop posts on Facebook claiming that Need for Speed was shelved with no source to back it up, because that's how AI slop content on Facebook works, for those that don't know. And I was in constant denial that Need for Speed was cancelled. And then we got the official confirmation. Criterion Games, after one stint as the main Need for Speed studio again since Most Wanted 2012, has now been converted, so to say, into a Battlefield studio. This happened before, if you remember, during the development of Need for Speed Unbound. The game was, I believe it was delayed because EA drafted Criterion to help out with Battlefield. But this time, Criterion is a full-on Battlefield studio, meaning that they will only, for the foreseeable, work on Battlefield and nothing else. And I don't know if you read the article from IGN during the 30th anniversary celebration of Criterion Games, but basically it seems as though EA has told the higher-ups, the people who manage the studios and Criterion Games, that Need for Speed, Burnout, Black, and other franchises need to be completely wiped from Criterion's existence. Even though this is not a new Criterion in any way, they're pretending like this is a clean slate. There's no point in thinking about the past. We're strictly focused on the future and Battlefield. Right off the bat, this is a bunch of bullshit. I know that everybody seems to think this, except for the minority that's had a Need for Speed franchise fatigue, which in hindsight is kind of understandable. But this sucks. It really does. In this video, we're going to talk about it. We're going to check out all the fumbles that we kind of maybe turned a blind ear and eye to at the time, and also what could potentially happen in the future. But before we do that, I need to take care of some housekeeping. 5 or 6 years ago, I went on record on my other channel, Korrmotive, which was still called Core at the time. I went on record to say that Electronic Arts is not to blame for the quality of those Need for Speed games up to that point. That video was released in late 2020. Heat was still the latest game. It was only a year old at the time. And I made this video saying that basically we should kind of stop blaming EA for everything, because the studio is the one responsible for making the games. And I want to set the record straight, because this is a video that exists on YouTube and I don't want to appear hypocritical. So let's get that out of the way first. First thing I need to say is you have to understand, at the time, people were blaming EA for the quality of the products themselves. They were blaming EA for the fact that 2015 Payback and Heat felt unpolished, and that was the whole main discussion at the time, which was what prompted me to make the video in the first place. Looking back at it, and after several years have passed and we've seen how EA handled the franchise in the years that followed, and also being armed with a little bit more knowledge about game development and who does what, I'm not ready to absolve Ghost Games of all fault as of yet. Because while the publisher is at fault for a lot of things regarding the Need for Speed franchise, in order for the end product to be bad, there needs to be some incompetence from the studio working on it. Not all of it, but some. And, the publisher is responsible for allocating budget and allowing the studios time to develop the product, but there's still some fault in the studio, because at the end of the day, the studio is responsible for making the game. The publisher is responsible, for the most part, to get the game out to consumers and to market the game, provide the budget, things like that. So I'm still not ready to say that Ghost Games was entirely faultless for delivering 3 in a row not that good Need for Speed games, and I'm probably going to get crucified for saying that Heat wasn't very good. I wasn't the biggest fan of Heat. It was good. I did enjoy my time with it. I completed the main story and all that, but there was a lot wrong with Heat. I wasn't a huge fan of that. And also, for all the quality of life things that plague every single one of the post-reboot Need for Speed games, so from 2015 to and including Unbound, I think that some of the blame for that can be put in the studio. And I know some of you are probably thinking, how come Black Box made great games? Well, you have to understand, Black Box made Need for Speed games like 20 years ago when the scope of video games was much smaller, and it was, admittedly with crunch and various things like that, possible to release a somewhat good product within a year. As video game consoles and other systems started advancing, and as soon as the scope started getting bigger, things changed, and as it turns out, 2 years maybe wasn't enough time to develop a Need for Speed game with the full scope that it needed to have. And this is evident in all of the post-reboot Need for Speed games. One example in particular is Heat's Speed Hunters Showdown. I think personally that given extra time, the Speed Hunters Showdown was supposed to be structured a little bit more like Pro Street's legal racing events. And this is pure speculation, I have no idea if that's the case, but for me, the Speed Hunters Showdown in Heat just felt a little bit half-assed. I'm sorry that you're not seeing Heat gameplay on the screen right now, but I ran out of space on my hard drive, SSD, so you're seeing Unbound and other various Need for Speed games that I currently have installed. So anyway, before I get too much off topic, just wanted to set the record straight. I still don't think that Ghost Games needs to be absolved of all wrongdoing with the Need for Speed games, the ones that they worked on. But we will talk about the ways that EA did fumble the franchise and what is there to blame on EA. I don't know where to start, frankly. I mean, we didn't really notice the cracks. I feel as though in 2015, I was 13 years old when Need for Speed 2015 came out. By the way, Need for Speed 2015 is almost 11 years old. Did you know that? I was very young at the time, and I think that a lot of us fans of the Need for Speed community that have since grown up a lot, including the people that I still talk to on this subject matter, I feel as though the developers and especially the community managers did a good job of kind of putting a curtain on top of everything and saying, it's okay, you know, this is fine. You don't have to know about how EA is mishandling the franchise and their plans for the franchise and different things like that. However, the cracks really began to show with Heat's post-launch support, which was absolutely terrible. I believe that was because they again drafted Criterion to work on Battlefield, which is what led to the delay of Unbound in the first place. They completely fumbled Heat's post-launch support. There was only 2 DLC cars, and one of them was quite literally pay to win because it became the second fastest car in the game and it was paid DLC. And then the only other real content update that came after that was crossplay, which made it the first EA game with crossplay on all platforms. They did a decent job with Unbound's post-launch support, in my opinion, especially Kaizen, but then they went and fumbled something else about Unbound, the marketing. Unbound received 1 trailer before launch, and that was 2 months before launch, by the way, which never happens. EA would always promote the main franchises at E3 or now Summer Game Fest and Gamescom and things like that, but Unbound skipped both of them and was revealed randomly online in October of 2022, 2 months before release. And it also made it one of the first Need for Speed games to launch in December. Or maybe it wasn't, I don't know, but the first one after several of them launching in November to launch in December. Unbound had no marketing, pretty much. There was social media posts and the like and stuff on the Need for Speed official website, but there was no second trailer, there was no launch trailer. In fact, couple of days before the game launched, people started live streaming the full game on Twitch, and EA didn't do jack shit about that, which was frankly a bit ridiculous. And they just let the random streamers who got early access to the game, while not having deserved early access to the game, just live stream it on Twitch. There you go, there's the launch trailer. That was stupid. And there were a lot of things that EA did wrong with the Need for Speed series, especially post-reboot. Like the fact that the games kept changing creative hands. So I don't remember this story exactly at the time. I don't think any of the news outlets reported on it. But when Payback started development, Craig Sullivan was still at Ghost Games. And his vision was sort of like a sequel to Pro Street and that kind of thing. And then Craig Sullivan left Ghost at the beginning of 2017. They drafted in William Ho, who was more of an action driving type of guy. And, well, we got Payback, clearly. And even though, Payback is fucking terrible, first of all, let's just get that out of the way, my personal opinion on the matter, but also, Payback, again, felt a little bit unfinished. It felt like there was something missing, not least because there was no free roam police at any point, which was stupid. At this point in the video, it sounds like I'm just bashing the post-reboot Need for Speed games for the sake of bashing. In all honesty, I did get some enjoyment out of them, especially Unbound. I still maintain that Unbound is the best post-reboot game because it sort of managed to shake the some of the things that were haunting the Ghost era Need for Speed games, some of the persistent quality of life problems, like the overpowered cars and different things like that. But then it would go on to keep some of them and create new ones. Like, there's no good reason why for 4 games in a row we can't apply the same wheels on both sides of the car. I'm pretty sure I don't know much about coding and video game development, but I do know that sounds like a pretty easy fix. And at one point we started to think they're not doing this, not because they can't, but because they literally don't want to. It's the only thing you can think of when for 3 games in a row the same 2 cars are overpowered. You don't have a lot of options left. You're like, okay, they're not fixing this on purpose. Like, they're just taking the piss at this point. I'm not saying that that's the case. I'm just saying that's how it felt, 3 games in a row, same issues keep persisting. And the spotty post-launch support, and then they add this feature, but then they remove this feature with the promise of adding it post-launch, and they never did. And really, I can go on about this. This is just the stuff that I can remember at the top of my head. But bottom line is, a lot of mistakes were made. And this is also a huge mistake. The fact that EA wants to pretend that Criterion never worked on these franchises to begin with, even though Burnout and Need for Speed is what put Criterion on the map in the first place. It just doesn't make any sense. So I guess EA is now in a situation, and this is going to sound like a shitpost, and to be honest, it kind of is, but EA is now thinking, okay, everything is now Battlefield, and possibly the sports games, FIFA and Madden and things like that. Nothing else matters. F*** the indie studios. F*** the other studios that have worked on our big money-making franchises for decades, Battlefield and FIFA. And that's stupid. Man, I sound like a kid. I just keep saying it's stupid, because it's stupid. And a lot of things were mismanaged. And I don't know why. I don't know what the hell was going on internally at EA or Criterion or Ghost Games or nowadays EA Gothenburg. I have no idea. What I do know is that a lot of things were fumbled, and that's led us to this situation to begin with. See, this is what most people are going to tell you, and myself included, because that's the objective truth from what we know. Because we were there when these games were launching, and we were there for the pre-release window when there was little to no marketing in some cases, and there was little to no post-launch support in some cases, and so on and so forth. But I would like to add another reason why Need for Speed ended up in this situation. Granted, this is probably a very small reason, but it's still a reason regardless. The remasters. No, I'm not talking about Hot Pursuit Remastered. That's perfectly fine, nothing wrong with that. I am talking about the people who keep asking for remasters. Because, I don't know if this is the case, but to me it seems logical that this would be the case. When you're an executive at a big video game publisher like EA, and you want to give your development studio the money to develop a new product in this franchise, but then you go on social media, and nothing is ever good enough for the people who are supposedly waiting for this new game. All they want to see is remasters of games that are 20 years old, and remasters that would be very difficult to produce due to all of the licensing constraints and different things like that. Maybe more than likely you'll just ignore them and make a new game anyway, but also it must be just a little bit demotivating, especially if you're the developer, not the publisher. You just look at these comments and you're like, what's the point in making a new game and all of these ideas that we potentially have when all of the community wants is a remaster of the old games? None of this stuff that we have planned or that we want to work on will ever be good enough for them. Again, I'm not saying that this actually happened, but I am pretty certain that this is a small part, like 5% of the reason why. No video game studio will feel motivated to make a new game with new, fresh ideas if all the community wants is a remaster. And I know that Nintendo fans are huge remastered folks as well, but I personally don't think I've seen it as bad as the Need for Speed community. So, remastered people, you should be proud of yourself. No, I'm kidding. It probably wasn't your fault, but, you know. So, Now we come to the ultimate question. What's next? Do I think that Need for Speed is permanently cancelled? No. No, I don't. Because, well, they would have used the word cancelled, and they didn't say a specific word about what the Need for Speed franchise is. It's more of a, we formed this conclusion that the franchise is shelved based on the fact that Criterion now includes a Battlefield studio in the name, and also the fact that they don't want to talk about the old franchises. Though that being said, there was an update to that birthday celebration story that people were surprised, the higher-ups at Criterion, like the vice president or something, they were surprised that the conversation about Criterion's old games was so active and that people were asking, hey, are we going to get a new Need for Speed or a new Burnout? Admittedly, they completely shut out a new Burnout, but that's why Recreation 2 now exists. According to Fiona Sperry, founder of the studio, Recreation 2's announcement immediately after this news was pure coincidence, but still, that's cool. So, no, I don't think that Need for Speed has been completely cancelled. It's just that EA is putting all of its marbles in the wrong basket. I'm not sure if that's an idiom, but I've heard similar ones. English is not my native language. EA just wants to completely focus on Battlefield and FIFA and other supposed massive cash cow franchises. Even though Need for Speed was a cash cow in and of itself, the game sold well, the previous games did, especially Heat. I think Heat was a pretty big success in terms of sales on all platforms. But I think that they're leaving the door open for a Need for Speed game. It's just that we will probably wait a while for a new Need for Speed game to happen. And honestly, this might sound pessimistic, but I would not expect a new Need for Speed game at least until the end of the decade, or maybe the start of the next decade. If it happens sooner, I'm guilty as charged, I'm wrong, but I don't think that we're going to be getting a new Need for Speed game anytime soon. And believe it or not, people, there is actually some merit to this news. There is actually good news in the bad news. Need for Speed is now no longer on the AAA racing game radar on the map, which means that other studios can swoop in and finally make some type of Need for Speed replacement, spiritual successor, holdover, whatever you want to call it. I know that's already happening with Clutch, and I'm, as I've said before, I'm following along with Clutch, and I can't wait to play it. But also, other studios can jump in on the fun as well, like Ivory Tower. If you remember, the Crew game was a sort of Need for Speed competitor because it had police and illegal street racing. I heard recently that a third The Crew game was greenlit. It's probably going to be another Motorfest type of thing. That's not the fourth game, fourth. People are calling it tentatively The Crew 3, but regardless, it's now a perfect opportunity for other studios to stop chasing Forza Horizon money and potentially make Need for Speed fans happy with a sort of holdover, replacement, spiritual successor type of thing. For me, nothing will ever replace actual Need for Speed, because I am a fan of Need for Speed first and foremost, but it's not all bad news. We could potentially see the brewing and the generation, well, no, not generation, because that implies AI. Fuck AI, no. We could potentially see some sort of Need for Speed adjacent game now that Need for Speed is no longer around, and there's still a huge community of fans of Need for Speed that would like to have a game like that while EA figures out what it's going to do with the franchise for the foreseeable. And this little bit of info is from Black Panther. He is an authority on the subject matter after all. The Saudi buyout for EA means that EA is going private and they don't have to appease investors anymore. They will have massive debt to pay back to Saudi, but they will not have to, increase shareholder value, another LinkedIn bullshit. So maybe they'll be able to bring back the other franchises that they're well known for. So they won't have to just make cash cow game after cash cow game. Whew, man, this video was a long time in the making. Thank you everyone for watching this video. If you liked it, be sure to hit like and subscribe to the channel. Let me know what you think of the Need for Speed situation in the comments below. And I will see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.